Hey, this is Amy from Spunky Dogs, and this week is 4 pro tips on how to train your dog faster. In particular, 4 tips on how to teach new behaviors quickly and so that they stick.
Tip number 1 is treat continuously and generously when teaching new behaviors. Once our dogs understand what we want from them, we can drop the treats and move on to other reinforcers. But during the learning process, one of the most clear and efficient ways to communicate to our dogs what we want them to do is to treat them continuously for doing it. As long as you're doing what we want, the treats keep coming. Once you stop, the treats stop. Tip number 2 is to verbally mark, or if you use a clicker, click for moments when your dog does what you want them to do. If your dog does a behavior, especially for new behaviors, and absolutely nothing happens, they will have no reason to think that that was what you wanted them to do. For your dog, learning new behaviors is kind of like a guessing game. And if they guess the right answer and nothing happens, they're just going to move on to the next guess.
Good job.
The more times they guess the right answer and get no feedback, the less likely they are to choose that answer again. It should be more like a game show. Ding, 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 you got it. That was what we wanted. The more precise you can be in marking the behavior with a verbal cue like good or yes or with a click, the better your dog will understand what you want from them.
Sit.
Tip number 3 is for when teaching verbal cues, cue, pause, and then prompt your dog. Give your verbal cue, count 1 Mississippi in your head, and then give your hand signal or food lure or whatever you're using to prompt your dog. Dogs don't speak to each other and they don't understand English, so if you're giving your verbal cue at the same time as you're prompting your dog will never have reason to learn that verbal cue or really even notice that you're saying it. And another little note on that, wait until you have a really solid behavior before attaching a verbal cue to it. You can't really label anything that doesn't exist. And the last tip is for continuous behaviors like sit, down, stay, or hold eye contact. Make sure you're ending those behaviors with some sort of a release cue. If you haven't established a clear release cue, like break, release, okay, or a hand signal, when you start weaning your dog off of the treats, they'll have no way of telling when they're supposed to stop doing that behavior. Without establishing the concept of doing these behaviors until completion, your dog will think, well, I'm not being rewarded for this, so I guess I'll get up and do something else.
So that's it, 4 pro tips on how to train your dog faster. Reward continuously and generously for teaching new behaviors. Make sure to verbally mark or use a clicker to identify exactly what behavior your dog is doing right. Also, when teaching verbal cues, cue, pause, and then prompt your dog. Your dog has no reason to pick up on a verbal cue if there's a physical prompt happening at the same time. And for behaviors that are continuous, like stay, sit, or watch me when you're doing attention walking, make sure to end those behaviors with a verbal cue like break, okay, or a hand signal. Thank you for watching and happy training.